Hello and welcome back to our channel. If you've ever wondered how the world descended into one of its most devastating conflicts, or what the war's impact was on the 20th century, you're in the right place. Today, we're going to break down the story of World War I in detail, so let's dive in. World War I, also known as the Great War, was one of the deadliest and most transformative conflicts in human history. It reshaped nations, forged new alliances, and altered the global landscape forever. In this video, we'll take you through the complex origins, key events, and lasting effects of World War I. Before the first shot was fired in 1914, tensions had been brewing in Europe for decades. By the early 20th century, the continent was a powder keg ready to explode. How did it all come to this? Europe in 1914 was dominated by two opposing alliance systems: the Triple Entente, which included France, Russia, and Britain, and the Triple Alliance, made up of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. These alliances were formed to balance the power of their rivals, but as history often shows, they set the stage for a much larger conflict. Underlying these alliances was the intense nationalism sweeping across Europe, particularly in the Balkans. The region had long been a flashpoint, with various ethnic groups pushing for independence from empires like Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. And then, on June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife, Sophie, were assassinated in Sarajevo by Gavrilo Princip, a member of the nationalist group known as the Black Hand. The assassination was a result of rising tensions in the Balkans, where Slavic nationalists sought independence from Austro-Hungarian rule. The event sent shockwaves across Europe, as Austria-Hungary, with the backing of Germany, issued an ultimatum to Serbia. When Serbia's response failed to fully satisfy Austria-Hungary's demands, war was declared. This single act set off a chain reaction of alliances, mobilizations, and declarations of war that quickly escalated the conflict into a global catastrophe. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia, triggering a chain reaction that brought in major powers. Once the war began, it quickly spread across Europe. In the first few weeks, millions of men mobilized into armies, and the battlefronts began to take shape. Germany's plan, known as the Schlieffen Plan, was to avoid a two-front war by first defeating France through a quick invasion via Belgium before turning to Russia. But this plan faltered when Belgian resistance was stronger than anticipated, and Britain entered the war in defense of Belgium. Britain declared war on Germany on August 4, 1914, in response to Germany's violation of Belgian neutrality. Under the terms of the Treaty of London, 1839, Britain had pledged to protect Belgium's neutrality. When Germany's Schlieffen Plan called for an invasion of Belgium to outflank French forces, Britain viewed this as a direct breach of international agreements. Public opinion in Britain was also heavily influenced by reports of atrocities committed against Belgian civilians. As a result, the British government, led by Prime Minister H.H. Asquith, issued an ultimatum to Germany demanding an immediate withdrawal from Belgium. When the ultimatum was ignored, Britain formally declared war, marking its entry into the conflict and solidifying the alignment of the Allies against the Central Powers. As the war progressed, the conflict shifted to a brutal form of warfare: trench warfare. Soldiers fought from entrenched positions, facing unimaginable conditions: mud, rats, disease, and the constant threat of death from artillery fire, machine guns, and gas attacks. By late 1914, the Western Front had become a stalemate, with neither side able to make significant advances. The battle lines stretched from the North Sea to the Swiss border, and the war became a brutal war of attrition. Now let's take a closer look at some of the most important battles of World War I, battles that would come to symbolize the horror and scale of the conflict. First, the Battle of Verdun in 1916. The Battle of Verdun stands as one of the longest and bloodiest engagements of World War I. It was primarily fought between German and French forces on the Western Front, symbolizing the brutal and attritional nature of trench warfare. The German strategy, led by General Erich von Falkenhayn, aimed to bleed France white by targeting a position of immense symbolic value to the French. Verdun, a historic fortress city, became a symbol of French national pride and resistance. The battle began with a massive German artillery bombardment, followed by waves of infantry assaults. French forces, under the leadership of General Philippe Pétain, held their ground against relentless attacks, rallying around the famous phrase, "They shall not pass." Over 300,000 soldiers from both sides were killed, and the battle resulted in over 700,000 casualties in total. Despite heavy losses, the French successfully defended Verdun, making it a defining moment of courage and endurance in the face of overwhelming odds. Another infamous battle was the Battle of the Somme. The Battle of the Somme was one of the largest and bloodiest battles of World War I, fought between the Allied powers, mainly the British and French, and the Central Powers, mainly Germany, from July 1st to November 18th, 1916. It took place along the Somme River in northern France. The battle was intended to relieve pressure on the French forces at Verdun, which was under heavy attack by the Germans. The British and French aimed to break through German defensive lines, achieve a decisive victory, and weaken the German army. The British Army, led by General Douglas Haig, hoped to make significant territorial gains and reduce the German defensive positions along the Western Front. July 1st, 1916, marked the beginning of the battle. The British launched a massive offensive after a week-long artillery bombardment designed to destroy German defenses and barbed wire. The first day of the battle remains the bloodiest day in British military history, with over 57,000 British casualties, including nearly 20,000 killed. Despite the artillery bombardment, much of the German defenses were intact, and the British infantry were met with fierce machine gun fire as they advanced. The British forces introduced the tank for the first time during the battle, though they were initially primitive and not very effective. Tanks would later become a key component of modern warfare. The German forces had heavily fortified positions with deep trenches, concrete bunkers, and strong machine gun placements, making it difficult for the Allies to make progress. Over the months, the battle saw slow, incremental advances by the British and French, but little strategic breakthrough. By November, the Allies had captured only a small portion of the German-held territory, and the battle became a war of attrition. The conditions were grim. Heavy rains turned the battlefield into a quagmire, and soldiers suffered from horrific injuries, disease, and exhaustion. The battle officially ended on November 18, 1916, after months of heavy fighting. The Allies had advanced a few miles, capturing important areas such as Pozières and Thiepval, but the strategic objectives were largely unachieved. The Allied casualties were over 620,000, including British, French, and other nations involved, while the German casualties totaled around 500,000. The Battle of the Somme is often remembered as a symbol of the horrors of war and the futility of such large-scale battles in World War I. It was also a turning point in the conflict, showing that breakthroughs were hard to achieve without significant innovation in tactics and technology. And then there was the Gallipoli campaign, which saw the British, French, and Australian forces launch an amphibious assault on the Ottoman Empire. This disastrous campaign ended in heavy losses and a retreat, contributing to the collapse of the British strategy in the region. As the war continued, it expanded beyond Europe. The Ottoman Empire joined the Central Powers, while Italy switched sides to join the Allies. Japan, meanwhile, seized German colonial territories in Asia and the Pacific. In 1917, a major shift occurred when the United States entered the war. The United States officially entered World War I on April 6, 1917, after Congress declared war on Germany. The decision was influenced by several key factors. 1. Unrestricted submarine warfare. Germany resumed unrestricted submarine warfare, targeting all ships, including civilian ones, in the waters around Britain. This led to the sinking of American merchant ships and the loss of American lives. 2. The Zimmermann Telegram. In January 1917, British intelligence intercepted a secret diplomatic communication from Germany to Mexico. In the telegram, Germany proposed a military alliance with Mexico against the US, offering to support Mexico in reclaiming territory it had lost in the Mexican-American War, such as Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. This provoked public outrage in the U.S. 3. Economic interests. The U.S. had significant financial ties to the Allies, mainly Britain and France, and the potential collapse of these nations would threaten American economic interests. The U.S. had loaned substantial amounts of money to these countries, which would be at risk if they lost the war. President Woodrow Wilson initially sought to keep the U.S. neutral, but these events led him to ask Congress for a declaration of war. In his address to Congress, Wilson famously stated that the world must be made safe for democracy, framing the U.S. entry as a moral imperative. The U.S. mobilized quickly, sending millions of troops to Europe and providing crucial support to the Allied powers, ultimately helping to turn the tide of the war in favor of the Allies. American troops, led by General John J. Pershing, began arriving in France in 1917, giving the Allies a crucial boost in both manpower and morale. The collapse of the Central Powers in 1918 marked the end of World War I. Several factors contributed to their downfall in the final year of the war. 1. The American entry into the war. When the United States entered the war in 1917, it provided fresh troops, resources, and morale to the Allied powers. This bolstered the Allies' ability to mount counterattacks, while the Central Powers were already exhausted from years of fighting. The influx of American troops in 1918 proved decisive, tipping the balance of power. Second German exhaustion and the Spring Offensives. Germany launched a series of offensives in the spring of 1918, known as the Ludendorff Offensives, aimed at breaking the deadlock on the Western Front before American forces could become fully involved. While initially successful, these offensives ultimately overstretched German lines and exhausted their resources. By the summer of 1918, the German military was running out of manpower, supplies, and morale. 3. The Allied counteroffensive. After the initial success of the German offensives, the Allies launched a series of successful counterattacks known as the 100 Days Offensive, starting in August 1918. This offensive, bolstered by American forces, pushed the Central Powers back on all fronts. The Allies gained significant territory, and the German army began to collapse under the pressure. 4th, internal unrest. The Central Powers, especially Germany and Austria-Hungary, were facing severe internal unrest. Food shortages, economic collapse, and disillusionment with the war led to widespread strikes, protests, and uprisings. In Germany, sailors and workers began mutinying, while the Austro-Hungarian Empire saw nationalist uprisings and calls for independence from various ethnic groups. Germany. On November 9, 1918, the German Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated, and a new republic was proclaimed. This was part of the broader collapse of the German war effort and government, with revolutionary movements gaining momentum. Austria-Hungary. By late 1918, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was disintegrating, with various ethnic groups declaring independence and forming new states, such as Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia. The collapse of the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria. Bulgaria, one of the Central Powers, had already collapsed in September 1918, signing an armistice with the Allies. Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, another Central Power, faced internal collapse and military defeats in the Middle East. In October 1918, the Ottomans signed an armistice, marking their exit from the war. The Armistice. On November 11, 1918, after the Central Powers' internal and external collapse, Germany signed an armistice with the Allies in Compiègne, France, effectively ending the fighting. This marked the defeat of the Central Powers in World War I, and the war was officially concluded with the signing of the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. The collapse of the Central Powers was a combination of military failure, internal collapse, and external pressure, culminating in a series of rapid surrenders and the end of one of the most devastating conflicts in history. The conclusion of World War I in November 1918 marked a significant turning point in global history, culminating in the signing of the Treaty of Versailles in June 1919. This treaty aimed to establish peace and prevent future conflicts, but its terms had profound implications, particularly for Germany. The treaty imposed heavy reparations on Germany, requiring the nation to pay substantial financial compensation for the war. Additionally, it stripped Germany of its territories, limited its military capabilities, and placed full blame for the war on the country through the infamous war guilt clause. These punitive measures fostered resentment and economic hardship, setting the stage for political instability in Germany. The Treaty of Versailles also led to the establishment of the League of Nations, an international organization designed to promote peace and cooperation among countries. Although the League aimed to resolve disputes and prevent future wars, it ultimately struggled to enforce its decisions and lacked the participation of major powers, including the United States. This weakness hindered its effectiveness and contributed to the challenges of maintaining global peace. The long-term effects of the Treaty of Versailles on global politics were significant. The harsh conditions imposed on Germany contributed to the rise of extremist movements, including the Nazi Party, which capitalized on national discontent. Furthermore, the treaty's failure to create a stable and cooperative international environment paved the way for future conflicts, including World War II. Understanding the conclusion of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles is crucial for grasping the complexities of 20th century geopolitics and the ongoing struggles for peace and stability in the world. The war left deep scars on the world. It marked the end of an era of monarchies, empires, and the traditional balance of power in Europe. The loss of life was staggering, with an estimated 16 million people dead, including both military and civilian casualties. The legacy of World War I is profound and far-reaching, shaping the course of the 20th century and beyond. One of the most significant impacts of the war was how it set the stage for World War II. The harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles created deep-seated resentment in Germany, contributing to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party. The unresolved tensions and economic instability that followed the war laid the groundwork for another devastating global conflict just 2 decades later. In addition to its direct political consequences, World War I also resulted in significant changes to national borders and the emergence of new nations. The collapse of empires, such as the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires, led to the redrawing of maps across Europe and the Middle East. New countries were formed: Austro-Hungarian Empire, split into countries like Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and parts of Yugoslavia. Ottoman Empire broke apart, leading to the formation of modern-day Turkey and the loss of territories in the Middle East and North Africa. Russian Empire. The Russian Revolution of 1917 led to the rise of the Soviet Union under Vladimir Lenin. German Empire. The Weimar Republic was established in Germany after the abdication of Kaiser Wilhelm II. New national boundaries. The Treaty of Versailles, 1919, and other peace settlements redrew national borders in Europe and the Middle East. Countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia were created, while others were split or absorbed into new states, often with little regard for ethnic or cultural divisions, which sowed the seeds for future conflicts and tensions in these regions. Rise of totalitarianism. The instability and economic hardship that followed the war created fertile ground for the rise of extreme ideologies. In Germany, the punitive terms of the Treaty of Versailles contributed to the rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party, which ultimately led to World War II. In Italy, Benito Mussolini established a fascist dictatorship, promoting nationalism and militarism. In Russia, the Bolshevik Revolution led to the rise of the Soviet Union and the spread of communist ideology. The Great Depression. The economic turmoil following World War I contributed to the onset of the Great Depression in 1929, which worsened conditions in many countries and led to widespread poverty and social unrest. Culturally and socially, the aftermath of World War I brought about profound changes. The war challenged traditional norms and values, leading to shifts in gender roles as women entered the workforce in unprecedented numbers. The disillusionment felt by many soldiers and civilians alike gave rise to new artistic movements, such as Dadaism and Surrealism. which reflected the chaotic and fragmented nature of post-war society. Loss of life. World War I caused immense loss of life, with an estimated 10 million soldiers and 7 million civilians killed. The war also left many others maimed or psychologically scarred. The number of war widows and orphans skyrocketed. Women's roles. The war significantly changed gender roles, especially in countries like Britain, France, and the United States. Women worked in factories, served as nurses, and filled roles traditionally held by men. After the war, many women's suffrage movements gained ground, leading to women being granted the right to vote in several countries, including the US, 1920, Britain, 1918, and Germany, 1918. Psychological impact. Shell shock. Many soldiers returned home suffering from what was then known as shell shock, now recognized as post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. The war's brutality left deep psychological scars on the soldiers, as well as on the general public. World War I had a profound effect on art, literature, and culture. The Lost Generation, a term coined by author Gertrude Stein, referred to the disillusioned group of writers and intellectuals who were deeply affected by the horrors of the war. Authors like Ernest Hemingway, Wilfred Owen, and Remarque, with his novel All Quiet on the Western Front, wrote about the psychological scars and futility of war. In sum, the aftermath of World War I reshaped the world in numerous ways, from the creation of new political structures to economic turmoil, cultural shifts, and the eventual onset of World War II. The war's deep impact can still be felt in modern geopolitics and social movements today. Thank you for watching. World War I was a pivotal moment in history, shaping the 20th century and leaving a lasting impact on the world. If you found this video informative and engaging, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel for more content on historical events and their profound implications. Don't forget to like and share this video with friends and family who might also be interested in learning about the significance of World War I. Your support enables us to create more valuable content and build a community of passionate history enthusiasts. Thank you again for watching, and we look forward to having you join us in our next video.